some New England Patriots who still have a little work to do if they want a first-round bye. They need either a win against the Dolphins on Sunday or a Chiefs loss to the Chargers. Should be easy in theory as the Pats crushed Miami 43-0 earlier in the season. But Nick, do the Patriots absolutely need that bye to have any chance at another Super Bowl run?
1,000% yes. I believe this Patriots season, with or without the bye, ends in the divisional round against Kansas City. The only question is where the game's played. If they beat Miami, then they get the bye, and that game will be played in New England. If they lose to Miami, then they don't get the bye, and that game will be played in Kansas City. But it doesn't happen very often, but I am occasionally wrong. And if I'm going to be wrong about the Patriots, it's going to be because they get the bye. They take on a Chiefs team in round 2 that got beat up somehow in round 1, or maybe gets upset by Tennessee. Tennessee just runs the ball, and all of a sudden the Patriots are not playing the Chiefs in round 2. They're playing the Texans or the Bills, the teams they've already played this year, obviously, beating the Bills twice, lost to the Texans. Bad weather game, a vintage, one more vintage Brady performance he's able to pull. I don't think they can, and then go on the road to Baltimore and win that game. And when maybe Lamar gets banged up in his playoff game. There's so many things that have to happen, but it has to for this Patriots team. With as anemic as an offense as it's had over the course of the season, last week notwithstanding, there is no way it's going to happen in 3 consecutive weeks, including having to go on the road in the second and what would be the AFC Championship game. So I don't think they make the Super Bowl either way, Broussard, and I don't think you do either. But you probably give them a better chance than I do. But they've never made a Super Bowl without a bye, and there's a reason for that. It's not just the home field. It is the one fewer playoff game is such an enormous edge. They absolutely need it this year when it's the least talented Patriot team we've seen in a decade.
And think about what you said. They've never reached a Super Bowl without the bye. And that was when their offense wasn't, as you put it, anemic. So Tom Brady at his best, they needed the buys, or at least they've always prospered with the buys. And Bill Belichick, here's the thing as well, because I agree with you, to expect Brady to have maybe 4 straight top flight games is probably too much at this stage of his career. 3, he can give you that. Or 2 in a row, and then you get the 2 weeks off before the Super Bowl.
Last week as the first one?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
We're putting that. Yeah, he did play great. No, I'm not counting that one. I'm starting over. I'm starting over in the playoffs. Yep. All right. But they definitely need to buy. There's no question about it. You mentioned if they get Kansas City in the second round, you're going to need the extra week to prepare for Pat Mahomes. Yep. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And there's a reason that they've had this success with the buys, even in the regular season. 15-5 off the bye week in Bill Belichick's tenure there. They prepare better than any organization in the league for opponents. So the more time they have to prep for you, the better chance they have of winning. They definitely need the bye.
We talk about this tandem a lot, Belichick and Brady, and who really deserves the credit for how well they've played and how far they've gotten over the years. Don't you think that if they were able to get far this year, it would show us that this is Belichick doing this? I mean, Brady's not vintage Brady. I mean, you could really look at the fact that if they could go far deep into the playoffs, that's
this year, if they end up making or winning a Super Bowl, this year certainly goes much more heavily in the Belichick side of the ledger than the previous year. In Tom Brady's defense, the Super Bowl they won a few years ago against Atlanta, that Brady gets to wear all that glory himself, because the Belichick defense with 2 weeks to prepare got shredded for 2.5+ quarters against Atlanta, and then Brady led the greatest comeback any of us have ever seen. But that is going to be the only way that debate is going to become anywhere other than 60-40 one direction or another, Broussard, is if Brady plays somewhere else and he either has immense success, or when Brady's done playing for the Patriots, Belichick has immense success. You're going to have to see them apart with one of them thrive. It's the only way that this debate's going to have any type of resolution.
Here's the other thing Belichick's fighting, because you're right. The more success they have as Brady's older, that goes toward Belichick, right? The credit. However, Belichick's had 7 seasons in his career without Tom Brady. They made the playoffs once. Okay, 2 times they had a winning record. And even in New England, the year he coached there before Brady was the starter, they won 5 games, I believe. And then the year Brady stepped in for Drew Bledsoe and they won the Super Bowl his first year, they were losing. They had a losing record when Brady stepped in. Yep. So Belichick has to overcome all of that to get the lion's share of the credit over Tom Brady.
All right, on to the NFC now, where the playoff buys are still up in the air. The 49ers can lock up one of them with a win against the Seahawks. The Packers can do the same by beating Detroit. All right, follow along now. The Saints get a bye if they beat Carolina, and either the 49ers lose to Seattle or the Packers lose to the Lions, and the Seahawks steal the bye if they beat the Niners and the Packers lose to Detroit. I thought it was pretty simple. Just wanted to say the words anyway. All right, Nick, all that being said, which NFC team needs a bye the most?
Well, I'm going to just off the top eliminate Seattle because I think Seattle has overachieved this year. I picked them to win the division, and even I didn't think they'd be alive for a bye going into Week 17. And they might very well beat San Francisco this weekend. But Seattle, they have a point differential this year of plus 12. They've outscored their opponents in total in the year by 12 points. That is worse than Philly. That is worse than Tampa. That is worse than Tennessee. It's 70 points worse than Dallas. So I say all that to say this. With or without a bye, I do not believe Seattle has the horses to make the Super Bowl. The other 3 teams do. And I like it. I don't know if during the regular season there's been a bigger Seattle supporter than me, but I think this thing ends in the divisional round of the conference championship game. So now we're talking about San Francisco, New Orleans, or Green Bay. There's a case to be made for any of the 3. I believe the answer is Green Bay for this reason. They have an edge that goes along with not only a bye, but home playoff games that those other teams do not have, which is the elements there are so different than almost anywhere else in the league other than maybe Buffalo and New England. But it's even different in Green Bay, given the bitter cold it gets to, the weather they have to deal with. And Green Bay is conditioned for that. And for the first time in a long time, they have a team built to where it can take advantage of it because they have won 12 games this year without Aaron Rodgers having to be brilliant. I understand the home field advantage New Orleans has in that Superdome. I understand San Francisco probably wanting to avoid those elements of either the Superdome or going to Lambeau. For Green Bay, I think having a bye, which will only be the 3rd time since Aaron Rodgers took over as a quarterback, a validation of the season. The playoffs go through Green Bay. And, by the way, one thing that's very simple, they get a bye as long as they beat Detroit. We know that. If Green Bay beats Detroit, we don't know if they'd be the one of the 2. They get a bye. Also, what it would mean for Green Bay if they don't. Do all this work, and then in Week 17, you fall on your face to the Lions, and now all of a sudden, you're playing an extra playoff game. For all those reasons, Green Bay's my answer.
Logic says you're right about Green Bay and the elements. Lambeau Field, the home field advantage. However, since 2000, they're only 6-5 in home playoff games. I was talking to Greg Jennings, our colleague here at Fox, who obviously played with the Packers and won a Super Bowl. He said there's no home field advantage when it comes to Lambeau. As far as it's home field because you're at home, you have the crowd. But as far as you having the advantage in the weather,
the elements,
he said you can't get used
for everybody.
Yes, he said even if you're used to it, you live there, it's still freezing and you feel it. So maybe that lines up with the record 6-5. I think it's San Francisco, and here's why. Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyle Shanahan. What don't they have that the other coaches have? Experience. Now, Matt LaFleur obviously doesn't have it, but he's got Aaron Rodgers. So every other team, New Orleans, Drew Brees, Super Bowl champion. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, Super Bowl champion. Seattle, Russell Wilson, Super Bowl champion. Pete Carroll, and, LaFleur as head, Sean Payton. So look, Garoppolo has shown that he adjusts to challenges and handles them well. Every time he's been thrown in there, they win. Now, whether or not his numbers were spectacular, sometimes they are, but even when they haven't been, they've tended to win. So he's shown all that, but the playoffs are a different animal. And so I just think that for them to have the extra time to prep for it will help them. And as I said earlier, they haven't been playing great football lately. All right, offensively, they had trouble trouble protecting Garoppolo last week. Defensively, first half of the season, they're allowing 11 points a game. Their defense looks almost historically good. Last 7 games, they've given up 26.5 points a game. So they need to get themselves straightened out, and I think the extra week would help them do that.
You don't think it alleviates the pressure for San Francisco? This is sort of a surprise year, I think, a little bit for them. They came on maybe a year before anyone else thought they would. They don't have all the pressure of, well, we've been there, we're returning there, we have all these players that, I mean.
Well, I think they've got the pressure in this regard. You're right that I don't think most people expected them to be, you win in Week 17, you're the 1 seed in the NFC in that discussion. But one of the reasons they're surprising is this 6-year plan with Shanahan and Lynch got off to such a slow start. Like Shanahan, we don't think about it now, but if they had another bad year, we'd be saying, wait,
right,
we're halfway through this tenure, and what the hell's going on here? The one last point for Green Bay, because neither one of us talked much about New Orleans. I understand New Orleans, the only playoff game they've lost in that building with Breeze and Peyton was the one last year that they then changed the rules because of. Given New Orleans' losses on the defensive line with Rankins and with Davenport being done for the season, I think on that fast track in New Orleans, Green Bay would be able to go there and move the football. I'm not saying they would necessarily win. I think go there and move the football. I cannot see either one of these teams, even though San Francisco dominated Green Bay when they played, Jimmy Garoppolo with no playoff experience, or Drew Brees, who has played so differently in outdoor playoff games, going to Lambeau. And I think Green Bay, if they needed to play a high-scoring game, you still have Aaron Rodgers. In perfect conditions in San Francisco or in New Orleans, can either one of those teams go on the road if it's 18 degrees and snowing and